North South Connection Podcast Network viewers, welcome to this No Holds Barred special edition What If series me and Aaron do here 3 times a month.
Is it still special edition?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Who cares?
Because just if we're still doing it all the time.
Special. 3 Wednesdays a month. We are here doing this, and we want to thank you. The response has been
amazing,
fantastic. The comments, the thoughts, the suggestions, just everything has been great. So we really appreciate all the awesome feedback on the What If. So it gives us motivation to keep going.
Keep it coming. Yeah, because it's funny because when we first did the first What If, it was like, hey, let's do this thing and see.
Right.
Yeah,
they've been awesome.
It's been a lot of fun.
So this one came courtesy of some guy named George Aaron from Canada somewhere. And the concept has to do with CM Punk. We've heard about him recently in the news.
It felt like the time.
Yeah, it kind of felt timely. But the topic isn't related to his AEW foibles. It is related to 2013 WWE. And the question to you, my friend, that you asked to us is, what if CM Punk had main evented WrestleMania 29 like he so wanted to?
Yeah, and probably deserved to.
So what would that have looked like? Who could it have been against? And what does that mean for his future? The rest, because that's his last year. Like he doesn't make WrestleMania 30. So what does it look like going forward? So let's talk about this real quick. Who would gut reaction if Punk is penciled in that main event slot? What's your choice to fight him?
Rock. I think it's The Rock. I mean, it's either my gut is The Rock, and it was at the time, or it's The Rock and Cena.
3-way. So you like a 3-way idea?
Yeah, I mean, look, in a perfect world, I think what makes that show better is if you swap dance partners for the two kind of big matches. So you do Punk against Rock. Rock wins the Rumble. You do Punk against Rock, and you do Cena Taker.
Right.
I think that show's much better if you just do that.
We never got Cena Taker, right? That's the one big match. We never got it at Mania when they were in their peak. I mean, obviously we got it like in 03 or whatever, but we never got them at their peak. They tried to kind of do that half-ass stuff at 34. It doesn't really do anything. So yeah. Now, but you're saying the show's go ahead.
I just want one more thing on Punk on Taker Cena is that you never did it at Mania, and the big thing with doing it at Mania is that at that point you're probably thinking Cena's going to win.
Right.
You know, and I think that during this period, it's tough for them to find a Punk. Like even when he fights Punk, I mean, you never really believed Punk was going to win, despite the great stuff they did in the match. But if Cena's there, then that's that real threat, right? Of like,
I think it's another good what if is what if Cena and Undertaker fought at Mania? When's the best time to have done it? Like we can do that at another one, right? Because it could be this year, but there could be other options. So
I think there's at least one glaring one.
Yeah, we'll file that away of what could that have been, right? And we can also do a streak one at some point. Sure. What if someone ended the streak?
Who should have beaten the streak or whatever.
So back to Punk.
Yeah.
So you're telling me the card is definitely better if we go Punk, Rock, Cena, Taker, but I'm not sure it is, because you're going to guarantee me Cena Taker is going to surpass Punk Taker, which I'm at like the 4 to 4.5 range, I think, on that, right?
I don't think it needs to.
Well, that's surpassed. It's going to equal it to me. It's going to equal it because I'm not confident Punk and Rock can deliver a great main event. We saw them fight at the Rumble and No Way Out, right? Wasn't it back to back or Chamber or whatever? And like I know it didn't have the Mania thing, and Punk was a little angry, but still, like Rock is kind of out of gas at that point. Like he had the great match at 12 with Cena. It's awesome. By 13, like that run is probably one of his worst when it comes to diminishing returns for The Rock. So I think Punk Cena would have been the way to go. It ends that era.
I would have been happy with that too. The match we got on Raw, right?
Yeah,
yeah, that would have been good too. Like I just think that once The Rock is coming back, he's in one of those. There was no need to do Rock Cena 2. You didn't need to have him get the win back.
No.
There's certainly no need for it to be for the belt.
No.
So even if you did Punk Undertaker for the belt, I think you have a lot of options to get Punk in that main event.
I think the 3-way works. Like I think Punk, Rock, Cena. So Cena wins the Rumble. Punk beats Rock at the Rumble, right? So now Punk is still your champion. We go to the Chamber, and maybe you have Rock Punk again, but they do some kind of, shit finish or whatever, draw. So Rock is like, I get another title shot, but Cena's like, well, Mania is my title shot. So now you say you end up making the 3-way, and then I mean, do you have Punk retain or do you have Cena win the belt?
I think you move on from Punk from that point. Like, I think no matter what, that title reign, based on everything, although it's funny how it ends up turning out, but like, I think at that point, I had no problem with Punk dropping the belt there. I just felt he did such good work during that year, despite never really being put in that main event position. That he kind of deserved it.
So I mean, I'm good with Punk Rock. I'm just not sure that makes it a better show. Like I think
I think that Punk Rock at WrestleMania will deliver a substantially better match than Cena Rock 2 was.
Yeah.
Like, not better than Cena Rock 1. I don't know if it reaches that, but let's say both those matches level off at 4 stars each. Right, which I think is totally feasible. Like, I think it's feasible for Punk and Rock to get to 4, and I think it's more than feasible for Cena Undertaker to get to 4.
Yeah. Right? That to me, Cena Taker matching Punk Taker is a better bet than Punk Rock, like out exceeding. I mean, maybe Punk wills it, right? I mean, he might have been so determined, right, that he wills it to work. He does it with Taker. I mean, he wills it to work, right? So maybe he makes it happen, but it's probably a better show. I don't know if it's a significantly better show, but you give Punk the main event run that he deserved, that he craved. I just like the idea of Punk Cena the best because it pays off their journey as being the two guys of that era. And now you're ready almost to transition by the end of the year. You got Orton coming back. You got Bryan coming back up. You got the Authority shit. Like, this would have felt like the end of that bridge. Like that Money in the Bank 2011 to Mania 29 would be like the Cena Punk era. You got your Triple H Rock era. And then you have your Punk Cena era.
I just feel that I feel that Cena beating Punk for that belt is almost like too much of a return to the status quo.
That's why I don't have Cena win.
Yeah, but I think the Punk reign needs to end there.
Maybe it ends a month later.
Yeah, but regardless, he fights at Mania. He main events Mania. Okay, so I guess the first very obvious question.
Let me just ask you one other thing.
Yeah.
Before we get to the obvious question, if you go 3-way, who does Taker fight?
Well,
Brock.
You try to bring in Sting.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, you could try and just make it happen.
Throw a ton of money at Sting.
You do Sting Taker, or I mean, Triple H Brock was pretty much set in stone since SummerSlam. Triple H was getting his fucking win back no matter what, so you can't even oscillate to Taker Brock.
Allow me to throw one other thing in here that I completely forgot about until this second. Before I forget it, we can deal with it after. Another potential opponent for Punk to defend the title is Ryback.
Yeah.
Because he was so over. If you go back and watch the 2013 Elimination Chamber, he's the most over guy on the roster.
They're not going to main event with. That's the problem. You're going to end up closing with Cena Rock. Like, Ryback's just not main event. They're just not going to do it.
Well, the problem is Cena Rock. That's the problem. Because no matter what, you're not going to put anything over that. But it's a superfluous match.
You could do Ryback Taker though.
Yeah, and then Ryback's just losing. Although, if you want to end this, we can deal with that on another podcast.
I mean, there's other guys like I don't know, like Sheamus is pretty over at that point.
You could do Undertaker and Kane against the Shield,
right? Dolph. And Dolph Taker. You never know. But no, you could do Hell No against the Shield and Taker. You could do Kane, Bryan, Taker versus the Shield.
Yeah, that might be interesting.
So,
although, because the Shield fights like Orton, Sheamus, and Big Show, right?
Yeah, so it's like whatever.
Yeah,
kind of. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that's like a low-key kind of sneaky dream match, but
you're talking about a Taker opponent, right?
Yeah.
At that period, or Belter Del Rio.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He fights Swagger, right? I mean, I'd probably not get anywhere. I don't. I'm not ruling out the Dolph thing. Like, he was getting so over, and like a hard-fought loss to Taker, and then he cashes in. Like,
that's right. I forgot he's the Money in the Bank winner at that point,
and he has a great moment with Del Rio the next night. So
yeah,
you could have come off of that. Like, he has he takes Taker to the limit unexpectedly. Taker almost treats it like, okay, Dolph, whatever.
Who is this guy with the
and then Dolph takes him right to the limit. Taker beats him, and then respect, and then he wins the title the next night.
Yep. And then Undertaker beats him for the title on SmackDown.
Yeah, chokes him out. All right, so whatever. There's a couple options for Taker. Again, I think what you laid out is probably the best bet for a good card. But then do you have Rock beat Punk, or does Punk retain? Because you're taking the belt off of Punk, but Rock's winning at Mania.
I think I think Rock's got to beat Punk. Like, I know it sounds crazy, and then he has to do one more pay-per-view. I also think that, like, if you wanted to do a 3-way, what you could do is have Cena win the Rumble and have Rock fight Cena at the Chamber.
Yeah.
And have like some sort of bullshit finish. Yeah. Which necessitates the other rest. Because that's the problem I think a lot of people have with that, with the once in a lifetime, is that they booked it as once in a lifetime.
Right, and then they do it again.
But with it, like, I get that you can plan a year and ahead, but like, it was just so transparent.
Yeah.
Like that, like, oh no, we're just waiting for Cena to take the belt so that he can go.
I mean, could they have done, like, Punk says, WrestleMania 10 in New York, Bret Hart, right, fought twice. They'll do it the year after Bryan, so obviously it's not out of the realm. He says, I'm going to do what no man has ever done. I'm going to end the streak and then retain my title in the main event against Rock and John Cena. So you still get Punk Taker. Maybe you open the show with it or do it early. Yeah. Punk loses, right? The same. And then he goes and loses his belt. So it almost is like this ultimate bad night for Punk. Yeah. But it's also historical in that he fought Rock and Cena and fought The Undertaker all on the same night. And I think he could do it.
And it actually keeps him strong in the loss.
Yeah.
Because, like, well, I lost the belt, but I had a war with The Undertaker
earlier in the night.
Yeah, I mean,
that might be the way to make the card better. Like, you're not losing anything, right?
If you want to make the card the best, you just have him fight Daniel Bryan.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, but realistically, could you do a 4-way? Just put Taker in the friggin' title match too. Taker, Punk, Rock, Cena.
Taker's winning the title, right?
Yeah, true. Well, who cares? Well, I guess so. Cena wins it. He holds it to what? Bryan at SummerSlam?
Yeah.
You kind of need him to have that belt there,
I guess. Yeah, he's the best opponent for Bryan.
You need that match.
Although you could make the argument that he could have lost it to Henry, but
nah, I think you need that. You need that moment of
for Bryan
to beating Cena. It's a passing of the torch to beat Cena clean at SummerSlam.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so you said you had an obvious.
Well, the obvious question is, he's not leaving in 2014 then.
I mean, I don't know. Like, when did things really fall apart for him? So is he that mad about Mania that he ends up leaving, or is it stuff that happens after the Z-Pack stuff, the staph infection building?
I feel like all of that. So I'm kind of at a bit of a loss, and I think it's good to talk about this now because Punk is like in our consciousness now because of all the AW bullshit, right? But like, I remember at the time, and I think I still do to a certain point, thinking he was very aggrieved by the WWE.
Right.
Like in terms of how they treated him, in terms of how they viewed him. And then you spend more time learning about the dude, and like, it's like, oh, maybe they were right. Like, so
But was he aggrieved? Because if you look at like, when he wins, maybe that first run, they fuck him over with the Triple H and all that shit with Nash, stick him and all that. But from when he beats Del Rio and was it Cena, right? At Survivor Series, whatever he does at Survivor Series, when he wins the belt.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pushed pretty fucking strong over the next year. Like, he's on a ton of pay-per-views. He gets a ton of time. Yeah. And yeah, I know he doesn't always close the pay-per-view, but he does close some. And he has a long run. He wrestles a lot on Raw. He's the main guy through a lot of that stretch. Like, I think it's a little overstated to say he was like treated poorly.
I'm not saying he was booked poorly. That's not I wouldn't say that at all. I thought he was booked quite well. He was the champion, but never booked as the main event for the most part. But I don't think that's the problem. And when you listen to him in shoot interviews, his point of contention is very much, I mean, he's very angry at Triple H for not putting him over and stuff.
Right.
But his point of contention was about being in the main event was that he's not paid the same.
Right.
And I think more than anything, I think that's a thing. And I get that. Like, I really get that because I remember hearing him in a shoot interview be like, well, you're wrestling The Undertaker in the main event. That's a main event. And him saying, like, well, am I getting paid the same as John Cena and The Rock? And they're like, no. So I think that's the point of contention.
Yeah.
And I think when you get past, that perceived disrespect, everything else can be viewed through the lens of carelessness as opposed to maliciousness.
Right.
And I think he views what happened to him as malicious because he didn't feel respected earlier.
Right. So he beats Rock at Rumble, has some kind of kerfluffle at Chamber.
Yeah.
Gets the main event, whether they do the double duty, whether he wins, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does he go from there, though? Because
I think he still has Brock, I think.
Right, because post Brock, he's in that weird realm where a lot of these guys end up in. Like, what do you do with him at that point? Like, I know he's a great guy. Like, he's at that point, he would have been around pretty much straight. He's kind of in the Brett 96 spot, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's great. He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. But he's been wrestling for like 7 straight years, overexposed, nonstop. He's been champion multiple times, feuded with everyone. Like, what do you do?
I think you do what they should do with everyone once in a while is give him some fucking time off.
Yeah, I think he needed the break. So that's where I was headed. I think he takes that time off in 14 anyway.
Well, I don't think it even needs to be 14. I really think that, like, I think that if he gets beat by Brock and then takes off until the Rumble, I think that does it. Because that's the meandering period, right? That's the period where he's fighting Curtis Axel, he's fighting Ryback again and gets hurt, he's fighting Paul Heyman. And, like, when you get right down to it, the plan they had for him at WrestleMania 30, probably not that bad.
Right.
If he was going to come back and beat Triple H, like, not that anybody ever comes out of a feud with Triple H better, but like, if they're going to put him over strong, because I think what's interesting with Punk is that with Bryan as the champion, and that opens a really interesting door.
Right? Well, does Bryan get screwed? Because before that even, like, is he still main eventing Mania against Batista and Orton? That's not really the plan, right? I mean, Batista versus Orton and Punk versus Triple H is the plan. Does that groundswell for Bryan still build that intensely if Punk is around battling the Authority? He's like almost in that spot a little bit, right? When he comes back, if he's back for the build to the Rumble, the crowds are pumped to see him. He's going to fight Triple H at Mania. Like, is that Bryan groundswell to be part of that feud? Or do we get Bryan versus the Wyatts again or some sort of Mania?
Well, you got
Sheamus, whatever it was going to be.
At the time, you got this weird dichotomy going on because, like the feud, the Bryan groundswell is from it's such a unique thing that happened because it was fans cheering for the real life booking as opposed to the storylines, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think that probably doesn't get touched because, especially if you give Punk the time off in the fall, Bryan gets only more shine as a consequence because, you know, if you look at what they're both doing, like Bryan's fighting the Wyatts while he's fighting the Shield, they team up against the Wyatts. So I think that happens.
I'm just curious if they think, though, they look at Punk as enough of an olive branch to not take the steps and they just deal with it. Like, okay, well, we're going to give you Punk beating Triple H at Mania and the fans will love that. So now we can still go with Batista Orton because we're going to give them this and they love Punk and Punk's going to go over Hunter and whatever. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the potential is at least there because Bryan getting into that Mania slot is like, that's teetering and perilous as it was. Like, that wasn't the plan. I mean, that was that was made after. So, like, they already were not wanting to do that. Just Punk give them even more of a reason to stay steadfast and say, well, the crowd will be fine because they're going to get Punk beating Hunter and they don't need Bryan because they'll be happy with that.
Right. Maybe. I think you're right that the potential is there. I think it is a pessimistic view, but with this company, it's always good.
Especially at that time period. I mean, that's the most pessimistic time to be.
Like, I think the big loss, let's say they still do put Bryan in there. I think the big loss, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is the Bryan Triple H match, which I think is kind of a masterpiece and really helps with the Bryan. I think what happens after that is where things become interesting because I wonder if it ruins something else because Bryan gets hurt after this and then they put the belt on Cena and then just slide Cena into that role. Does that then become Punk in that role?
Right. So you do not get Cena Brock. If SummerSlam 14, do they go Punk Brock rematch?
And if you do that, you kind of have to have Punk win, like, and then what? Right? Like,
I'm struggling to see Punk staying around. Like, I feel like he's going to get pissed at something else. Like, I can't just see him
He is like
it's. I feel like it's borrowed time, no matter what. Like he's just going to get agitated about something because they're still going to want to push Reigns. Like that's coming as well. The Reigns train's pulling out, right? So like that's going to be a thing. So is he going to get aggravated that Reigns is being shoehorned into everything over him? Like I can't just see him. Oh yeah, he's just there till today, like doing his thing. Like
I'm curious if. So here's the thing with Punk. It's that like I feel like he's the type of guy that bitches about something and then they give it to him and then he'll find something else to bitch
yeah,
about.
he's never happy. He's just never
like,
happy.
Okay, why they'll never make me champion. They make you champion for a year. Oh, they'll never give me the main event.
Right.
I could totally
look at AEW. Oh, they gave his own show. It's still not enough. You know what I mean? It's like
AEW. Look with Punk and AEW. It's almost like there's clearly something wrong.
Right.
There's a piece of a puzzle that we're not privy to.
Yeah.
That something is. And then you have a guy like Mark Henry coming out and saying like, "Oh, well, everything's going to be good now, right, guys? Because the problem's gone."
Yeah.
Like that's the tone of that. Whatever he said.
Yeah.
And so there's something strange, and I'm not even saying it's external. I think there's something weird with Punk. Like when you're that sensitive to like when you come into a company, he comes into AEW, he's immediately far and away the biggest star in the company.
Yeah,
like he's the biggest star. He's arguably the biggest wrestling star of the 2010s.
Right.
And he stopped wrestling in 2014.
Right.
Right. But he's still arguably the biggest one. And then the comments of like people that are like way less experienced, way less over, way less important, gnaw at him. You know, like, is it just that he wanted to be that mentor? And if he stays in, I'm actually curious about that because when he went back, he was very much like, well, I'm going to get to be a mentor. I'm going to get to do this. I'm going to get to do that. Like, I'm going to get to work with the young guys. It seemed like something that he was really interested in. And I wonder if that's a role that he wants to take in the WWE later for guys like Rollins and Reigns and Ambrose and even Bryan. He's the type of guy, and I was talking about this with my buddy this week, and we kind of said like it's almost like he walked into AEW expecting to be treated like the Undertaker.
Right.
Like I'm the old guy, I've seen it all, I'm here to help, whatever. But he wasn't given that reverence, and so it infuriated him. And I'm curious if he stays in the WWE, if he actually gets some of that reverence.
I think he does because you look at I think Owens is like the prime example of a guy who made the decision to proactively stay when he could have went, right? And he's been treated like royalty since, right? Like he was the booking was shitty until he decided to stay. He said, I'm staying. And he had a main event with Steve Austin like months later, right? Yeah. Had this mega run with Daniel Bryan, had the, title shots with Reigns, not Daniel Bryan, with Sami Zayn. Yeah. So he's been a made man. And I liked his decision because it would have been the easy way out to go to AEW for him.
Yes,
all these other guys are there, the work rate guy, but he said, fuck it, I'm going to be the guy here. I'm comfortable, I'm making a lot of money. Yeah. And I can be a legend here, right? And that's what he's going to be. He's going to end up being the guy that stayed, the legend that stayed, right? He's going to be the Sting of, like, for WCW, right? The guy that stayed.
And that could have been Punk's run, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah, it could have been the guy that stayed. Yeah.
It could have been the guy that stayed. And when you look at what could have been with him, like, you lose an extended feud with Daniel Bryan, where Daniel Bryan is now a main event player, right? Because, I mean, when he fought Punk for the title in 2012, he wasn't quite there yet. Right. You lose. Maybe Punk's the guy that puts over Reigns finally.
Yeah, maybe he gets Reigns over.
Right. Maybe he'd be able to do that in a different way. Maybe we get a rematch with Brock. Maybe we get him putting over guys like Rusev. We get AJ Styles is going to come into the company. So it's just the company is probably better with him in it during that period. As long as
if he stays and he kind of gets through it. Yeah.
And I think if they just with him use a bit of a less is more approach.
Right.
Like, a couple of feuds a year, then he goes away or relaxes, because like you said, you don't necessarily need him there all the time. Like, I'd rather him not be on the show than have him wrestling Curtis Axel.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe he even fucking joins the wives. I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless, right?
Right.
And it's just such an interesting spiral effect because if he stays, does Roman Reigns have an easier time getting over?
Maybe, I don't know, or is it more angst because now he's also keeping Punk out of the way? Like, depends how it's presented, right? Does Punk put him over and then Punk is still a guy, or are fans angsty again because they push him over Bryan, now they're pushing him over Punk, like he's another guy in the waste of Reigns.
I think at that point it's okay because Punk's already had his run.
Yeah.
Right. Where Bryan didn't really have a run. That was the issue, right? And even when he comes back, he doesn't have a run because he got injured so fast. I also think Punk leaving really, I think there's an interesting combination. I think from 2005 to like 2014, there's two big things that really hurt the company in the eyes of the fans. I think it's the refusal to listen to the fans begging for a John Cena heel turn, or just not him winning all the time, or not, giving us some time off from him or whatever. There's that, and Punk leaving. And I think those are because Punk was the guy. Punk was like the anti-Cena, right? It was like, oh, okay, well, even though Cena's there now, they're still focusing on Punk, and he's completely different. He's the type of guy we like. But those two things happen, and I really think that's the underpinning of the hatred of Reigns, is that it's like, well, we screamed that we didn't want Cena forever. It fell on deaf ears. Then they finally picked a guy we wanted, and they fucked him over, because that was the narrative, is that they fucked him over. Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't the narrative that like he was an asshole and he left, which is entirely possible. But the narrative coming out of that podcast is that they fired him on his wedding. They didn't treat him properly when he was hurt, and they refused to acknowledge him for being at the level he was, or whatever.
Right.
Now that last one, it's completely subjective, but the other two, when you hear them, it's like, holy shit, they really treated him bad.
Yeah.
Like they fired him on his wedding. And even when Vince goes on Steve Austin and apologizes, it feels like,
bullshit.
Like it feels damage control and like,
I mean, one feud too, like he had that little feud with Orton, was it in 2012 or 11, whatever it
11,
is.
yeah.
That could have been another one too they do later, like in 17-ish, with a Legends kind of feud, right? Like where Orton's, when he kind of reinvigorates himself in that 17, 18, 19 stretch, like him and Punk could have had probably a classic. I mean, you get the Hardys coming back, so you could do Punk and Jeff Hardy again. You can run that back from 09. I mean, Jeff still puts on some really good matches. So, I mean, there's plenty for him to do. It's just, can they keep him happy and keep him around? And does he become that ambassador guy, right?
Well, and see, it's funny because we talked earlier about how like he kind of wanted that reverence of being that locker room leader or whatever, and feels slighted because he doesn't have it. But it's an interesting thing because it's ignoring his actual legacy.
Right.
And his actual legacy is he is one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. Like, because I don't think you get to Bryan, Rollins, Ambrose without him.
No, he's the prophet that comes ahead, right? Like he's the first really to break through, the first indie guy to break through and have a main event run in 08, 09. So I mean, he paves the way for sure for all those guys. So
and then when all that happens, then let's assume he stays. Then the next question is like, well, there's two questions, right? And what do you think? Has his presence in the company hurt AEW as a company?
Yeah, I think it has.
Right?
I think it's made it look way more of the inmates running the asylum, that Khan has no control. I think Khan really needs like a heater. He needs that enforcer that's going to like really like run. Like he needs a Nick Khan. I mean, I hate to say
Ross.
Like
Jim Ross is right there.
Well, Ross is done. I think the problem, Ross is like a aging baseball manager who's like, kind of a disciplinarian, but like the players are like too young to give a shit about him. I mean, I don't think Ross is the guy. They need like a business guy who doesn't give a fuck about the wrestling stuff. And that's what Nick Khan has done. And that dude has like revitalized WWE. I mean, he's turned them into a money-making machine, positively presented everywhere. Like they need that guy. They need the icer, like the dude that doesn't give a shit to cut guys, the guy that doesn't give a shit about politics. Like he didn't grow up as a wrestling fan. So you balance that, right? They have they have Triple H on one side, that's the wrestling nerd.
Get Bischoff in there.
He's done too. But they got like the wrestling nerd, and then they get the cold-hearted business guy, right? Yeah. Right now they only got DVR Booker Tony Khan, right? But they don't have the business guy, the ice-cold business guy that can say, listen, this is what you got to do, right? Like everyone in there is like kind of a mark, and it's awesome from a fan standpoint because it's all guys just doing what they want that are great wrestlers. But if you make it a successful, and they've been successful, I don't want this to come off like they're not successful.
But I think overall his presence is hurt because
they'd be better off if he never showed up easily.
I think they think they'd be further along,
or if he came back originally and got hurt and never came back. If he had that little couple match run when he first came back, and then he got hurt, and he's like, "Listen, my body can't do it anymore. I'm done.
I'll stay on as a backstage role."
Or not even that. Just say, "Hey, thanks for the final run. I'm out." and he never comes back for this collision bullshit. Like, I think this is what's really damaged it. I think they could have survived the other stuff. Yeah. I think this is what's really like made it look stupid now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like not only is there the PR hit of all the bullshit with him, but also the space that he takes up on that roster.
Yeah. And I think a little bit too, they were worried to let him go, thinking WWE would sign him back out of spite. And it could still happen now. Yeah. I think there's more than a 50% chance he's at Mania. Like, I don't think it's crazy to say.
When you read the reports, it looks like he wanted to go.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
it wouldn't shock me if he's in Philly at 40.
But he's not going to last.
Like, no, but who cares?
I think he's at a point right now where, like, it's like it's like when you cut the skin off your hand or something, and like, you know, I bang my hand now, it's no problem. But if there's no skin, you put air on it, it screams, right? Like it's almost like he's so sensitive now about all these things, and maybe he's justified,
right?
Like, you know, if it came out, I could see it coming out like later that, like, you know, the Young Bucks were assholes and they were pushing him the whole time and whatnot. And then you know, did his arrival have anything to do with Cody leaving too? Like,
right. I think there's maybe a small chance, but Cody was better suited for WWE. He always has been. Like, I mean, but I think even if Punk only lasts 6 months and then snaps again, like, WWE's taking that payday. He shows up at the Rumble and then fights in Philly at Mania, like Punk in Philly for Mania. Like, I mean, I don't know who he's fighting, but whatever they choose, you know, I think it's almost too good to turn down.
Grayson Waller,
anybody you put him in there with, and it's like, you know, I think it's hard to turn down that potential draw and stick it to AEW at the same time. You know,
it's such a shame that, like, it feels like he was always the guy in WWF who you're like, you know, it's too bad their creative holds him back. Like, this guy would thrive in a in a creative freedom environment. But then that happened, and like,
maybe he would have, though, 10 years ago, right? Like, I think he's just old and bitter, and, you know,
why is he still bitter? Like, still,
it's like Brett in 04, 05. Like, he could have came back and had a money run then. He probably still could have done a little something, but he was still angry. You know, he was still pissed. Like, he did it for his fans, did the Hall of Fame, but he was out. He didn't even go to Mania the next day. Like, he was still mad. And Punk is, I said at the time, like, Punk always feels like the evolutionary Bret Hart, from his in-ring work to his style to the like his belief system that drives him. Like, you know, it's just, it feels like that. And he's just a dude that holds a fucking grudge. So I don't know, maybe 20 years from now, he'll look back and think, well, you know, I pissed away 15 years of my career. Like, that could have still been wrestling. And
maybe that's why CM Punk. Maybe that's why Brett likes CM Punk. He sees himself in him.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. So anyway, this was a lot of fun. Hopefully you enjoyed our continuing What If series. There's tons of what ifs we could do, but leave us some comments on social media. Reach out to us. We'll put them. We have a backlog we can add your comments to. We'll continue to churn through these 3 Wednesdays a month. Video exclusive, but subscribe to us on podcast, any podcast app for audio, for all our other shows. Subscribe to our video channel if you're watching now. Obviously you are. And also follow us on social media. You'll never miss a thing. What if this ended right now?